Have you ever wondered how some people remember vast amounts of information, like, say, a phone book? Well, Tansel Ali has done it, and he's done it with 2 phone books. And if you want to know the background story behind how and why he took on such a dense learning task, well, it's as fascinating as the memory techniques he used. In fact, I was surprised to hear exactly how he used mnemonic strategies to pull it all off. And it's a somewhat different approach than we normally talk about. If you don't know Tansel Ali, a few words of introduction before we dive into an epic conversation about memorizing long-form content, but also anything you want to remember as you go about your life. So Tansel is Australia's premier memory champion. He's not only won awards, but gone that extra step to create initiatives that help others. For example, he's the author of The Yellow Elephant and How to Learn Almost Anything in 24 Hours. Can you really learn almost anything in 24 hours? Well, that's what Tansel proved when he founded and ran the world's first school mind games. His participants read a 200-page book in 10 minutes, and to demonstrate their understanding, mapped out all of the book's contents on a wall. Then they gave presentations about the book in detail, and if that wasn't enough, they memorized an 11-minute TEDx presentation word for word, all in the space of a few hours. So, when Tansel says you can learn almost anything in 24 hours, you might want to believe him, or at least set aside your doubt long enough to give his teaching a try. So for more information and to join Tansel on future offerings like his online memory seminars, visit tanselali.com and get subscribed to his YouTube channel where he offers incredible videos about memory, mind mapping, and everything you need to learn faster and remember more. So go ahead, hit pause, get subscribed to his channel. Oh, and go and check him out on Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram. And don't worry, I can wait. I got a phone book here to read, man. I can wait. And you go do that. Go get all connected. It's fine. Oh, look, over 1 million Wi-Fi spots in Australia. Okay, so you've done it? Good. Listen, now that we're in sync, now that we're all hooked up, go ahead and hit that thumbs up. Get subscribed if you're new here. And let's get started with this epic memory training power session with the great Tansel Ali. Tansel, thanks so much for joining me again on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast. It's been a long time since we did this. How have you been keeping, especially given that the world turned upside down?
I know, huh? Well, last time we met, this wasn't a thing. We were just chatting away, just nonchalantly, and now we find ourselves in different situations. So it's amazing. Look, I find that people are more interested in learning now that because of the time they have.
Yeah.
Look, some people are stressed out, obviously. That is an understatement, but there's a lot of people out there that just want to learn. And, I've been contacted, quite a lot in the last couple of years in terms of, look, I've got a lot of time on my hands. I want to better myself. What can I do type of thing. So, it's been good from a perspective of getting a lot of memory content out there and helping a lot of people. So it's been exciting, I guess, to finally connect with a ton of people and help them out.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the online demand has gone way up, and you were talking about how you're going to be able to get out again, and including kids, activities for kids and so forth as part of one of the things you want to bring into the realm of memory, which I think is really great. So maybe we talk about that. Is there a age that's too young to get started in your experience, or how would you generally approach memory for the mnemonics specifically, or mind mapping, reading stuff for ages? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question because there's a lot of, there's research around the area and so forth. But I always look at what can we teach from a certain age? So if the child is from 1 to 4 years old, they're developing their speech and, their imagination, and maybe they're drawing a lot. So you get them to use their creativity more in terms of drawing or colors or something like that. Teaching a memory palace at that young age maybe a bit more challenging. I mean, you could possibly do it, depending on where the child is. So it just really depends, I believe, on, what the child can take in, essentially. Because things like, mind mapping can be done at a young age. You could do finger painting if you wanted to,
Right.
right? But it could also be applied on a really a challenging level in the corporate field where you can map out law and statutes and medicines and, really get to the nitty gritty of it. So yeah, just depends, I guess. But obviously starting off basic, and then as you get older, move along to other things. So that's what I've been doing anyway, just at the very basic level.
Right, right. And you also have these multiple interests yourself, like music applications and so forth. This is the challenge I find, and I would love to hear your take on it. Is that there's a lot of people who want to apply these things to everything, but then they don't really start with anything, because it's like Dr. Faust or Faustus. He wants to have all the knowledge, and he makes the deal with the devil and so forth. But then it just ends up collapsing on itself because there's no focus or choice on sort of one path. So you have the skills. So when you tell me, yeah, I'm doing stuff with music or whatever, it's just like, great, awesome, let's hear about that. But for the person who's just wants to get started, is there like some recommended portals of entry, or this is the thing that you have to start with first, etc., that you would sort of recommend?
Yeah, definitely. And I go back to how I first learnt memory. I didn't learn memory for the, I guess what I'm trying to do is, to study better, or I want to remember people's names better. I didn't start memory because of that. I started memory because I got interested in a competition. Like,
Right.
what's this? Memorizing cards, memorizing, random digits and numbers. And as soon as I was able to memorize, say 10, 20 words, because I always thought I had a bad memory, I thought, hang on, what's this? I've memorized some words. What else can I do? So I always say to people, if you're going to start off with something very small that you could accomplish, that you have a little bit of success. So if you want to start playing guitar, right, don't go and do all the, get yourself all the courses and stuff like that. Just learn the very basics. If you can strum a chord, if you can play a few notes, if you can maybe play your favorite song in the first couple of bars, that's a really great introduction into that, and that's only going to motivate you further along. And that's what I found with learning languages as well, is if you just introduce something that someone can take away and get excited about, then they'll come back for more. Whereas if you give a whole bunch of rules and overwhelm the mind's going to be like, well, I have to do this again. So it becomes stress, and we don't want that. So just a very quick entry into what you want to get into, get your foot into the door, I find is the best thing to do. And then slowly you can move up from there,
Right.
and that's what I've learned from yourself as well. I mean, we're on sort of video and just doing YouTube videos and stuff. Again, my aim wasn't to just get all this knowledge out there. Of course, that's the goal, but a lot of the reason why I'm doing it is to improve myself. So I thought, okay, let's just get one video out. Let's just get my phone and just start recording and see what comes up. So that was my initial entry. And the more times I did that, the more I could now say, okay, now let's get that video onto the computer. Now let's edit that video. And it was just one thing after another. So that's
Right, right.
where, for me, the excitement comes just by doing what you enjoy, instead of doing what you sort of have to or need to. And, yes, you can resist it, but it's a lot better if you're coming from a place of, happiness and enjoyment. Oh, I get to do this.
Right, right, right. Yeah, well, I mean that's the challenge. There's so much happiness and enjoyment, particularly in the memory techniques and so forth. But if you don't start somewhere, then you're never going to get anywhere. And I always think of that line in Rhetorica ad Herennium: those who want to memorize more difficult things need to start with words first. And so I don't know, what was your experience when you memorized cards the first time? Because when I think about cards, I don't think about playing cards. I think about words, essentially,
Mm.
or numbers, memorizing numbers. I don't think about memorizing numbers. I think about memorizing words that then translates into numbers. Is that
Yeah.
pretty much how you approached it, or?
Um, yeah, it was probably the opposite
Okay.
because I didn't know much about encoding back then. I just knew the techniques, and
Right.
that's all it was, just using the techniques, looking at the cards and saying, okay, there was 7 of diamonds here and 10 of hearts there, whatever. And then a number of seconds later, I'll get the image. So for me, it became, okay, how quickly can I get the image? So, after a while, when I could do it, it was about the images. But before then, it was like, this is just a nice little party trick.
Right.
and I have gone to parties as they've just given me a deck of cards and say, here, memorize, here's 52 cards. And I'm like, I'll show you 20. It'll take me forever to do 52 because, when you first start out, you don't exactly do it in a minute, right?
Right.
So that was the whole idea for me, is just I was just intrigued by what was possible. And then later on, once I really got into understanding memory, it did become about images, because that's what you're really trying to focus on, encoding those bits of data. Yeah.
Right. So when you did something like the phone books, just take us a little bit into that process, because that's not, I mean, I don't remember. We talked about it before, but the entire story, we talked about how you came into the competition and so forth, but I don't think we really got into the detail of, what are you doing? Are there multiple memory palaces? Are you using a 00 to 99 PAO, or are you just using PA, or are you doing CAO, or, like all these different configurations? What's the nitty gritty technical setup in terms of, here's a phone book, I'm going to memorize it now, build it all the memory palaces in advance? Are there no memory palaces, or you build them as you go, or what's going on there?
Yeah, that was a weird time in my life. It was what, 2010. So it's going back a while now, 11
Right.
years. So, a PR company contacted me and said, Tansel, want you to memorize this phone book, the Yellow Pages. And, I thought to myself, which idiot would want to do that, and it turned out to be me in the end. Because I thought, why, in competitions, I couldn't even be bothered memorizing for more than half an hour. And here I am going to memorize, 20,000 odd digits of numbers that it total came out to in 30 days. They gave me 30 days to memorize this thing. I thought, bloody hell. So I had to obviously create a plan, a strategy. You can't just go in and say, okay, I'm just going to use a memory palace and away she'll go.
Right.
So I had to look at, okay, well, how many numbers are there? How many ads do I have to memorize? What does that look like calculation wise? So when I did all that, I thought, okay, it's actually possible. And I did all the numbers based on what's the longest time it'll take me to memorize. So for an ad, it's just a number, like an 8-digit number, and an image. Right? Usually something like that will take us, anywhere from 5 to 10 seconds perfectly memorized. But you've also got something called the forgetting curve, right?
Yes.
You have to go back and review it. So I thought, okay, I'm going to spend 1 minute memorizing this thing. Just go really slow, and do 60 at a time or 100 at a time. And I do that daily. But the first day I did it, the next day I was trying to review, I couldn't remember any of them. So I thought, I've got 23 more days, because it took them 6 days to send over the book. So I lost quite a few days. Right.
Right.
So I had 23 days. I thought, I don't know how I'm going to do this. So I had to change all the strategy, try and memorize a lot better. So use a lot of quality story making ability, instead of just quickly making stories, which will what we were doing in competitions, right?
Right.
Because speed is important. When you're doing a feat like this, quality is important, because it all comes down to the recall. And then what I realized as I was going through the planning is, okay, all I'm doing is memorizing the telephone number to the image of the ad. So I thought to myself, well, if I introduce memory palaces, locations, I'm going to need over 3,000 locations, right? And that's a lot. I mean, I've got over 1,000, but I don't use all that 1,000. So I thought to myself, well, realistic, it'll make much more sense. It'll be a lot easier if the image on the ad was the location. So all I had to do was, for example, Bob's Plumbing. I'd imagine Bob bobbing up and down continuously, right? And because
Right.
he's a plumber, if you're an Aussie, he's got a plumber's crack. So
Right.
you can get that image in your head, right? So that's my location. The actual image was the location and the numbers attached to that. So that's how I did it. I didn't use any locations. The locations themselves were the images. And I did, well, I first started out with 60 at a time. And then when I finished 2 books, I had 8 days left. So I went a lot quicker second time around, of course. But I did learn a big lesson in reviewing, because I didn't know much about spaced repetition then. So I still managed to forget a lot. But the second time around I went, when I say second time around, I actually memorized it 4 times around when I did the 60, and then 4 times around again. And then when I went back for the second time, the whole thing, I went again another 4 times. So it was a number of repetitions, but it was repeating the story, not obviously repetition as we know it, the traditional methods. So
Right.
yeah, crazy times.
Well, that's cool. That's very interesting. It reminded me of something that I've played around with. I haven't done a full scale project like yours, but it occurred to me, and I started to use it when I'm reading books. Is instead of memory palaces, why not just use my image for the numbers, for the page numbers, to then create something like you're saying? It's not Bob the plumber, but my number for 09 is Brad Zupp, right? Because of ZP, right? So 09, and then I want to remember. Yeah, he's amazing. So I want to remember something on page 9, like Corsica is where Napoleon was born. Then I just, can just use that page and I remember the book and so forth, and just have Brad's up throwing away an apple core or whatever. And now that's, locked and ready to go. No memory palace needed. Although in my experience of this, and this is what I'm curious about, that is a page in a book, and it is pretty much still a loci or a locus. So did you have a sort of spatial experience with that, or is it just a pure image?
It's just a pure image because I didn't memorize any numbers, like page numbers.
Right.
A lot of people think that, what was page 2107. I didn't do any like that.
Okay.
If that was a prerequisite, then I would have had to have done something again with the page number system and connect everything like that. But for me, it was pretty straightforward. It's just connect the numbers onto the image. So if the image had palm trees on there and it was, Craig's cleaning or whatever, I mean, that's how Aussie businesses are generally. Then I'll create some sort of elaborate story there. Yeah.
Right. So you mentioned forgetting curve, and I think I saw it was you on LinkedIn or somewhere that you had an Herman Ebbinghaus video recently. So, what's your take on the forgetting curve, all these sort of scientific principles, what makes for effective recall so that, your stories are leading to just rapid recall and so forth? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good topic to get into because I've noticed when people get into memory techniques, and I'm sure you have as well, is that they use the techniques, they use memory palaces, all that, but then they forget the next day and they think, well, okay, I remember the first day or two, but why am I forgetting? And they don't realize that you still have to go and review because there is a certain element of, if you don't do it properly, if you don't memorize where you're using senses and emotions and things like that, if it's just very basic association, you're going to forget. And even if you do a really good memorization, you're still going to forget. So I think it depends on long term. If you want to remember things for long term, then obviously you got to set review periods for yourself. And I find that I always test this out because it's never the same with one thing. I could, let's say, memorize a whole book with, using one method where I review every few days and then a week or 2 weeks. But it might be different if I'm learning a table of elements or something like that. It might just be review, for, the next 3 days and then a week, and it might be in there for good. So just depends on, I think, your approach and how well you're memorizing it. That's what I sort of believe anyway.
That's the super frustrating thing. I mean, it's more of a gift than anything, but there's no evenness in information. So it's not only that you might need to practice recall more for certain things than others, but it's also that you might have to push a little harder to come up with an association for some things more than others. And it's just, the territory always seems uneven. It's almost like tennis. You just don't know what's coming at you. And the time that you think you're good is the time you blow it. So you kind of got to like always balance this back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely true. And I think that's good in a way because it's constantly working our brain and we're constantly, it doesn't become unconscious competence. We're not just automatically remembering stuff, right? We have to put some sort of an effort in there. We have to be aware that, we have to review this a certain time, or we have to memorize this a certain way. It's not just going to come to us naturally. And this is what a lot of people think, that, because we've been successful in our fields in some way, that we're just going to naturally remember things. In some way that might improve, but we still have to be conscious of what we're doing. That awareness is really key.
Yeah. Well, there's this music thing I want to get back to, because it seems to me that music is inherently designed to be memorable, and yet at the same time there's this overwhelming amount of information. And so I'm curious more about how if you can give us a preview of how you're thinking about approaching music and music learning. Because my response is always the hardcore. Okay, so you need to know the Phrygian mode. Well, what fret is E on or whatever? And could you use a major system to turn that into a numbered location, and then you have Ernie for E string and blah, blah, blah. Like, I just go right whole hog into the overwhelm stuff. But I'm just kind of curious, your sort of ideas for making music easier to learn.
It's funny, I think we spoke about something similar last time as well in terms of learning Japanese, where I was taking the approach of not using any techniques. Actually, I'm going to put myself in a deep end and see what I can get out of it, just purely from interest. Right. And that worked amazingly well, even though it's hard not to use memory techniques because we're so visual. I could say the same thing with learning, say, music. As a guitarist, what I did was I just wanted to play music from my favorite bands. So I was just moving my fingers like an idiot on the fretboard, thinking it's going to work. Right. And then I came across this thing called guitar tablature. I'm like, oh, wow. It shows you where to put your fingers. And that's where I started. And then from there, I mean, you can go memorize the chords, and you can memorize the notes, all that sort of stuff. But for me, it was just playing what I really wanted to play. There was no real strategy behind it. That's the beauty of some instruments as well, is that, you may need memory techniques eventually, but when you first start out, you just get in and start playing around and breaking things and making mistakes, because I think that's something that, we're not taught in school, because mistakes are frowned upon, right? But as we get older, we start to think, okay, I'm going to do many, many mistakes so I can analyze them. And that's why I train a lot of people, because the exercises I give them is designed to help them make mistakes. And then when they're making mistakes, I have a comment section in their spreadsheets that they're working on in their training log saying, okay, why do you think that was done that way? Or reflecting back on your mistake, how could you improve it? And just creating like a journal or a log or something like that from learning from mistakes is quite crucial in terms of leveling yourself up. So that's what I try and do, is just go in there, just raw, don't worry about any techniques, nothing, play around. And if you need something, then you can move towards that. So yeah, it's very raw at this stage. I don't generally have an approach or a system. It's more just get in there, do what you love. And then from there, you'll know, okay, I might need to do that. I might need to go harder here. I might need to learn theory here. And then you let that dictate what sort of strategies you're going to need later on.
Right. Yeah, I mean, one of the best things I ever had from a guitar teacher, I was in a band with him, but he taught me so much stuff. And he's just like, just get it in your system, make it messy, and then clean it up later. We had some pretty complicated runs to learn. And that was the best thing, is just screw it up badly and then analyze and figure out how you're going to clean it up. That's the same thing with a lot of memory techniques as well.
But
I'm
glad you,
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of people watching this now, a lot of people are focused on perfection. It's like, I need to get this technique right. I need to get this memorization right. I need to do this correctly. And they're so focused on it. And I can understand where they're coming from, but memory is this creative skill, and creativity doesn't necessarily improve with effort. Creativity needs time and space. So give yourself time and space. Just go out and do what you want to do and what you get to do, instead of stressing out. So I'm glad you sort of mentioned that.
Yeah, it's the teaching challenge, right? Especially with memory techniques, because people say, well, what should I do first? Memory palace, major system, or should I do the Dominic? Should I do this? And it's just like, just go. I don't mean that in a dismissive way, but if I had sat there and wondered all these things, I never would have got anywhere. It was just kind of like, wow, you can memorize a deck of cards? Wow, okay, so what does that guy do to do that? And then, just model that sort of thing. And then, oh, well, I could get this onto index cards. Let's figure out, more about this. And then you come more detailed, granular stuff into the memory palace, etc. But it's this spirit of play and being willing to just let go that is the game changer at the end of the day, as opposed to, get it all figured out, perfect journey, sort of, and here's the end, boy. And then they ask, how long will it take? And it's just like, You think I'm done? This is just getting started. I don't even know what I don't know about memory yet, you know? So do you have ideas that are, I mean, you're obviously very successful. So how are you helping people with these exercises to make mistakes and so forth? But even then, if they still aren't willing to let go, you know, what's your biggest tips for just diving in and enjoying the ride?
Yeah, you know what the best thing is about getting people to do the memory exercise? And when I say exercises, it could just be giving them, showing them the basic memory palace and getting them to memorize 20 words or 40 words, something like that. Because what you do is when you start to talk to people, some people, what they do is they start to question themselves as they memorize. So you try and capture, what are the thoughts? What are they thinking? And some people are generally negative, right? They say, oh no, I'm not going to be able to do this, or, I'm thinking of other things that are on my mind. So you can start to understand that it's not just about knowledge, it's about everyday life. So some people are generally stressed out because life's playing out. I mean, we're in this, pandemic at the moment. We have no idea what people are generally feeling. If you're just teaching content, we think, okay, they're going to get the content and so on. So when I give the example of giving them exercises, it's not just the result of the exercise. It's, okay, what's playing on with your mind? Where are you at in terms of your mindset? Are you growth oriented? Are you sort of, are you just fixed? I can look deep into that. It's almost like a life coaching session, even though I'm not a life coach, or I don't really like that term.
Right.
It's more about understanding the individual and where they're coming from. And if you give enough exercises, you'll see where people crack, where they plateau. If they break through plateaus, what have they done? I find that being in the plateau is probably the best position to be in, right? Because you've worked really hard to get to that point and now you can't get it. So you've had an increase in performance. All it takes now is a different level of thinking and approach. And that's another exciting thing altogether. So just from giving exercises, you can determine everything about what they're thinking, what they're feeling, in terms of their performance as well, on how they're going to be tracking later on. And a lot of this, and I'm sure you've done this as well, transfers into everyday life, into decision making, problem solving, living with people, communicating with people. And there's a lot of things in terms of confidence and self-esteem that come out from there as well. So I just draw out all of that just through the training, and it's amazing what comes out of it. Just from training a memory, I never would have thought.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. I don't like life coaching either as a term, but I also try not to dislike things because it doesn't accomplish much. But it is what we're doing at some level, because I don't know what you would think, but the more I think about this, either human consciousness is the production of memory, or somehow memory is nested in consciousness. And so it is our life. I mean, the quality of what we can remember is the quality of our life, and in there is attention span and so forth. So, if I was going to develop some philosophy of memory, which I might well do, it would get into these sort of issues, and then you have free will and so forth. And people are really struck, and they're struggling, and they create this story about themselves. And so it's interesting that those exercises would go in that direction, because ultimately it is about life.
Yeah, and you look at people that are stressed, right? If people are stressed, they have anxiety, what are they doing? They've got stories in their head. And we know that memory training is ultimately training in story development
Right.
and connection. So if someone is stressed and you know memory techniques, now you know how to make that story possibly weaker, and you know how to introduce a better story to override that. Now, I'm not
Right.
saying it's going to work for everything. I mean, it's deep down trauma. There's, go see a psych or someone, right? There's better methods out there. But for basic things, it can work. And I've tried it with so many people where I've got them to change their stories, change their level of thinking, and reduce the stress that way. And it's worked. I mean, I've gotten rid of anxiety myself, through my chronic illness and stuff like that. So, and it's
Right.
helped me out amazingly. So, being able to use that storytelling ability through training your brain has massive impact. And it is based on life, not so much just remembering. And unfortunately, a lot of people look at memory and think, oh yeah, I don't need to improve memory and all that. And that's fine. But they're stressed out, or they can't manage their time, or they're not as effective, speaker or writer. All of these things are benefited by training your memory.
Right. Well, when it comes to like the trauma and all that sort of stuff, one thing I think about a lot, at first I was super dismissive of it. And I don't know why I was, because I was actually, in some sense, I was suffering from it myself, because a lot of the teaching is make your images, your associations violent or very exaggerated in extreme territory, sexuality, etc. And a lot of people didn't ask me, like, what's the alternative here? And by going through the process of finding certain alternatives, I wound up feeling a lot better myself, because I wasn't cluttering my head with so much junk. Now, sometimes I'll still use this, but it's gotten a lot softer and so forth. So do you have tips for that, for if people are, they get it, they understand all the stuff, association this and memory palace that, but they just are worried, they don't want their minds filled with bizarre images, they don't want the sexuality, they don't want the violence, and they're just maybe concerned that their minds are, they're going to be in the Looney Tunes, literally, because they got all their childhood friends from the cartoons playing around in their minds and so forth. You have any suggestions for that?
Interesting. I never really thought about it. In fact, I usually warn people that, if you do train your mind to a certain level, then, obviously your storytelling ability improves. But if something negative happens, then you're going to dig yourself down into a greater hole. And that's happened to me many times before I realized what was going on.
Right.
And that brought up on, me going hospital, several times, and operations and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, for those people, I mean, I would suggest just starting very basic. Don't look at the whole picture. Just do one thing that works for you. You don't have to think of sexuality. You can think of, maybe exaggeration as a tool, and it just work from there. So it is, like you said, it's a creative process that gives us the luxury of using what we want to be able to use, instead of rules being inflicted upon us. Memory doesn't, I don't think it gives us rules. Yes, there are rules to abide by, but once you understand them, you can you don't have to go there. You can just say, I'm just going to use exaggeration, and that works for me. That's fine. You don't have to use memory palaces or major systems or anything like that if you don't need to. They're
Right.
great tools, and I think they're highly beneficial, but if a person doesn't need to do it and they just want to use that one thing, they can go ahead and do that. So I think keeping the mind, minimal. Minimalism is really the key, because the more information there, less gets done. That's what I found. So
Right.
if you have less information there, clear the mind. That's why I think meditation is really a strong thing to be able to get into. Once you clear that mind, then you can start to have greater focus into what you're doing. And that's really the key. If you have too many things, you kind of focus with too many things. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really important. So many students, they come and they're like, yeah, but I got 1,000 pages of X. And, it's just sort of, yeah, well, yeah, I know, I've been there. I did a PhD, but it's still one page at a time. And you got to kind of be able to focus on that. And, the monkey mind is quite a
Mm.
force if you're not able to sort of control it. Um, what I wonder is, is there a connection? But what is the connection, if there is one, to a technique like mind mapping? And then we'll get into some reading stuff. Do you have an explicit connection? For example, I sometimes in very targeted ways will use a mind map as a kind of quasi memory palace, like a clock-like structure, and then just use a major, so that 12 o'clock is the image for 12 and 1 is the image for 0, 1, etc., so that I just only have these certain amount of images, and then I know where they are on the mind map. Do you do that sort of stuff, or is it separate in your mind, or how do you go about mind mapping?
Yeah, I think there's so many uses for it. I mean, I've barely tapped into all of the uses. When I first started doing mind mapping, I was doing it all wrong. I went to a number of courses and I still did it wrong. So it took me forever to actually learn how to mind map. And then once I got it, I was like, aha, now it's hit me. And now I get it. So initially it was, let's just mind map thoughts and ideas. But then because I've been coaching for 20 years now, and working on people's goals with mind mapping really helps, because you've got something like, I want to improve my memory. Well, that's very general. What do you want to be able to do, right? From the mind map, I want to be able to remember names, or I want to be able to learn better, and blah, 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 blah. Okay, let's go into learn better. What does that mean to you? What does it look like? Oh, I want to get better grades, or I want to be able to retain more information. Okay, let's get granular there again. So you keep going until you can get something specific.
Right.
that you can get the person to do, right? And I think that's really the key in terms of using a mind map, is it can get really granular and you can use whatever you need to do for tasks, in this case, for your goals. If you just write down your goals, it's really difficult to find out where the connections are, I find. But if you do a mind map, then you can see everything on one branch is going to relate to each other in some form or another. So I think that's a fantastic way of using mind mapping. Another way that I generally use it is to mind map books. So you can mind map a whole, you look at the chapters, and chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, and then you mind map the subheadings, subheadings, and so on. And then as you're reading, you can put the keywords underneath those headings. And once you've finished reading the book and you've added more information, you can look at the whole mind mapping and go, wow, this is what the book's really about. So you can get a really good summary without having to just always go to the book. You've got it in your mind map. So I found that really exciting thing to be able to do as well. But look, there's many uses of it. But yeah, from working with clients, I found the goal setting one's great, because you can always say, look, there's a task here, you need to do it. Instead of saying, yeah, because I could generally just teach the basic strategies, but if it doesn't connect to what people want to be able to do, it's going to be useless. So that's why I have a tailored approach to the coaching. And with a mind map, it helps them connect to every single component that they've set out in their goals. So, and they get to see it as well. And now with online mind mapping collaboration tools as well, you can both work on it at the same time, and comment and do all these cool things. So yeah, there's so many methods, but they're the two that I probably use the most.
Right. So mind mapping in the metaverse, so to speak. I mean, we're looking at this kind of world coming with Oculus and all that, you could just put on your goggles and you have both mind maps up on a wall and say, hey, here's how I'm doing it. And, maybe a little bit of this in yours or whatever, and sort of mind meld the mind maps.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. It's good, but at the end of the day, you have to take action on those mind maps. So you can find that some people just spend hours and hours and hours mapping all that out, but they're not doing anything in real life. So, the action is probably more important. And same thing with people reading books. A lot of people say, I want to be able to speed read. Well, tell me, what makes you want to speed read? And I say, I just want to be able to read. I'm like, well, just start reading then. You don't need speed reading to start reading, right? So sometimes that's really the key, is to just start. Don't worry about these key skills that are going to get you there. You're not getting there because you're not even doing it. Right. So that's the key skill, to just get started. Doesn't matter if you make mistakes, analyze those mistakes, improve upon them, get guidance if you want to, and then slowly, you're still moving forward. You're not moving backwards if you're reading anyway. So that's what I find with people. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah, I find the reading thing fascinating too. I mean, I just had a conversation with somebody the other day, and they said, I want to fall in love with reading like you're in love with reading. And my basic response was, why? I mean, yes, I love reading, but I don't love reading everything. And I don't let love become, the game changer. I don't have to love a thing in order to read it. It's all strategy oriented and so forth. And so there's a difference between reading like however many novels I read last month, and some technical science manual. I love memory science, but trust me, it's not that the scientific journal things are pleasurable. It's so what do you think about that? Just the idea that reading or whatever, it has to be pleasurable all the time. I mean, that seems to be part of the fantasy, is that not that they're just going to read faster, but that they're going to be in love with it every minute of every second, sort of thing.
It's funny, isn't it? That's what people say. They say, oh, I want to fall in love with reading again. Or, I was like, it's such an open thing. It's like, reading what? You can read a newspaper versus reading something on your phone, reading Twitter posts. What do you want to fall in love with? So again, just honing down to that sort. And again, one day you might be fine, happy reading. Another day you might be crap. Like life happens. So I think, deeper questions to those people, trying to understand, what's the reason why they really want to fall in love? Is there something that they're lacking? Is it confidence? Is it something that they weren't able to do before? I think that's what's really the key to understanding if that people want to fall in love with reading. There's something deeper going on. I know for me, I was never a big reader, and just learning speed reading helped me to start reading. I couldn't do it initially. It is a very difficult thing to do, and I don't think many people can do it, to be honest, right? But it got me into reading in the first place, and I think that's important. Do I enjoy reading? Sometimes, not all the time, but again, I read sometimes because I have to, and sometimes I read because I want to train my brain. Sometimes I read because I actually enjoy it. If you start from reading things that you really love, like if you enjoy sports, read about sports. You don't have to read, terms and conditions or articles that you don't like straight away. Just start with something you enjoy, and guess what? You're going to start to fall in love with reading. I used to love martial arts. I used to read about martial arts a lot. Guitar magazines. I had a whole pile when I first started because, that was what I loved. I used to hate reading, but I had a massive pile of guitar and computer magazines. I never would have considered myself a reader, but it's something that I love doing. So, it's amazing what people say, that they want to fall in love with reading, but they could be reading other things that they're not even mindful about because it's their passion. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a part of the problem too is that people romanticize the people they're following. Like they think they're doing things that they're not. I recently reread or went through again the final interview with Christopher Hitchens. It was Dawkins who interviews him, and Dawkins says to Hitchens, "So you have such an extraordinary memory," and Hitchens says, "No, I have a good memory for the things I'm interested in, but a very shallow one for the ones that I'm not interested in." And that's very telling, right? Because I'm very interested in memory science. That's how I get myself through the painful articles. But I'm not in love with science writing at all. I often just scratch my head, Yeah. So in that case, it's the love of the topic that pushes through the grind. And then if I were to spend time on the things that I love reading, I might not read at all. I'd play guitar or whatever. So yeah, it's an interesting topic. But speaking of the actual techniques, I'm quite known as being a little bit skeptical, and I don't use the speed reading techniques as such. Although, yeah, at the same time I do. I just don't call them speed reading. So I separate skimming and scanning. I do a lot of that sort of stuff. I do a lot of priming, etc. And so I'm not really reading the book, in some sense. And so what are your favorite techniques in there, and what are some that you maybe don't use amongst the pool of tools that are generally grouped under this term speed reading?
Yeah, it's a really interesting term, isn't it? It shouldn't even be called speed reading. That's what I feel, because if you're reading visually, you're going to naturally read quicker. So that's how I see it as, when we're watching a movie or a TV show, we're not trying to remember every single word of dialogue because it's already encoded information. Whereas when we're reading, it's just data. And then what happens is, because we're not getting the image, we have to go back and reread. So I go back, reread, and still forget. And that's how I was. I was a terrible reader. When I found speed reading, I mean, I read Tony Buzan's book. I thought it was amazing, but it's just techniques, and you try the techniques, and yes, you improve your speed, but the comprehension still isn't there. And it's like, what the hell's going on? And am I missing something? So then I focused on, okay, what's the key fundamentals here? We've got information that's not being able to be encoded because I'm just looking at it. How do we encode that information, right? So I looked at the techniques again. I say, okay, if we take a group of words together, can I visualize it? So if I say something like, I picked up my phone, right? If I can grab that in a sentence, and if I point my finger in the middle and I see that image, then for me, that's speed reading, because now I can grab that bit of data and see it as a visual. Now, the funny thing with speed reading, and this is what a lot of people don't get, we know about relativity, right? You can actually speed read slowly as well. If you read something really, really slow and you're enjoying yourself, right, the relativity will tell you that you probably go for hours without even noticing how long it took you to read. Right? So you can speed read slowly as well. So this is where the definition gets really muddled up. For me, it's when people come to me saying speed reading, I want to try and understand what they want to achieve, right? And then give them the tools there, not say, move your finger this way or group these words here and there. I mean, that's not, when people get into the traditional speed reading techniques, first, you can't do them because your brain has to be at a certain level to be able to encode images. Once you train your brain, do all the memory exercises, then as you're reading, whether it's your normal reading, whatever it is, using your finger, skimming, as long as you visualize what you're reading a lot better, then you're naturally going to speed read and improve the comprehension, because now if it's raining in the book and you read it as rain, now you can feel the rain, right? You're
Right.
under the rain. So that makes a massive difference in terms of your understanding. So
Mhm.
that's how I look at speed reading, in terms of from a memory perspective, instead of a separate speed reading thing.
I love that you put it that way, because I feel more and more we got to come up with some different word than visualization. Because the first thing you say is, when you said rain, I heard thunder in my head because I'm quite an
Mm,
auditory person. Then you said you feel you're under the rain, like the kinesthetic sort of thing. So a lot of people say, but I'm not visual, I'm not imaginative or whatever. But at the end
mm,
of the day, you've just said, and I just experienced, you mentioned a physical thing, and I heard a sound in my head. And so where's the picture, and I'm more and more concerned about this, especially with the aphantasia thing, which I don't know if you're following all of that, but the
mm,
idea of no mind's eye, which I'm not going to self-diagnose, and I haven't gone to be diagnosed. But when I was a kid, they said I had imagination deficit disorder, because I wouldn't see things when they'd ask me, like, you're reading this book, what does the character look like? No idea.
mm.
Characters look like something, just so, what do you experience when do you have modalities that you prefer, or do you close your eyes and actually see stuff? When I talk about seeing pictures, they're hanging on walls, and then, the picture is going through my eyes in my brain, but when I close my eyes, I'm imagining. I don't see. So I don't. How do you experience all this?
Look, for me, it's very difficult as well. I mean, when I first started training memory, they're always talking about visualization, but it would always take me a while to visualize something because I always see the word. I
Mm,
used to always see the word. If they said, imagine a yellow cat, I'd really picture the word yellow cat.
right.
And that's how I was for all my schooling life, university life. That's how I memorized things, just by repeating over and over and over. And when I got into memory techniques, that's when the visual stuff kicked in, but didn't kick in for a while. I mean, I trained my way through just through sheer hours and hours to get to that visual component. But I felt like I was always working twice as hard as every other memory competitor because the images were coming quickly to them. Whereas for me, it would come maybe a second or two later because I'd see this word and then try and visualize it. And the visualization wasn't that strong anyway.
Right.
So again, just through sheer practice and understand, you can add emotions in there and add sounds. Because I came from a music background playing in bands and stuff like that. And then once those elements came in, it's like, oh, it's not just about visualization. I can use all these other cool things. And it became so much more powerful then. Yeah.
Right, right. And then you won what, 4 times the Australian Championship?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you just won from the first time you went, or had you had a practice year, so to speak?
Oh my goodness. Where do I begin? Well, when I first started, again, it was just my friend and I. We just trained, practiced together. It was our, exciting entry into the world of memory. And a few months later, went into this competition expecting to come last. But we came second and third in Australia. I thought, okay, that's great. Didn't think it was possible. So we went the following year. Same thing happened again, second and third. And we thought, this is amazing stuff, maybe we'll start teaching. So I've been, teaching for 20 years since that period now. And then we thought we'll go to Malaysia for the world competition, the amazing minds coming together. And, I got to meet, heroes of mine like Dominic O'Brien and, Kevin Horsley and, all these cool dudes that we later on got to do work with. So we went there and again, did really well. And I thought, wow, this is quite amazing stuff. What can we do? So we kept going back to the competitions, but because the competitions, I'm not sure people that are watching now understand how the memory competitions work. But, for example, we get lines of 40 digits like that, right, in rows. And if we make one mistake, we don't get 39 out of 40, we get 20 out of 40. And if we make two mistakes, we get zero. So because we were memorizing pairs of digits, if we make one mistake, we'd get a zero. So what happened was for the first 6 years of entering a competition, I would memorize twice as much as everyone else in the competition. And, Jennifer, who was running the competitions at the time, would sometimes show me because I wanted to see what I got wrong. She'd show me that I'd be memorizing twice as much as everyone else, but because I was making a mistake here and there, right, I was getting a lower score. So I kept
Right.
getting beaten every year for 6 years.
Oh,
And I thought, oh, this is driving me crazy. And then I had to change, that definition of insanity of, doing the same thing over and over again,
right.
expecting different. That didn't work for me. So I had to try something totally different. So what I did was, instead of memory training, I did visualization training. That's all I did. And instead of doing, 95% of training my memory and getting a result, I did 95% of just pure visualization and then test my recall afterwards. And because I did that, my visual capacity grew, along with everything else that I was using. And then I entered the competition, and I won every single year that I entered,
Right.
because of that bit of change that worked for me. I'm not saying it'll probably work for everyone else,
Right.
but it is the foundation skill of memory, I believe, is to work on all those skills before I even tackle, memory palace and whatnot, because the memory palace is a holding spot. Yes, you can make that memorable as well. Unless your story making ability is not great, it's not going to work for you. So that's what sort of changed for me. And after 6 years, then I started winning the competitions. But yeah, it took a very long time to finally understand what was going on. And I learned some valuable lessons along the way.
Right. Right. So to be clear, what do you mean exactly by pure visualization?
What I mean by pure is, let's say I see a bit of content and it might be words, right? And the word might be pantomime, right? And say, okay, pantomime, what comes into my mind? At that time, it was just words, the word pantomime. And I was a brilliant speller at school. So probably because I was just always visualizing the right word.
Right.
But now it's like, okay, what comes to mind from a pantomime? I've got people, in a theater format doing something. There's no volume coming out of them. What does that look like? Um, is there any music in the background, like classical music? Is there a dark stage going on? So all of that was going inside my mind, when I was, visualizing. So the visualization came first, and then all the auditory stuff like music and whatnot. But it won't happen all the time. Sometimes I might get the music first and then the visual side, and so on. So
Right.
that's what I mean. The visualization also encompassed all the auditory and everything else in there.
Right. Yeah, that's very interesting. So when we think of something like pantomime, what are you breaking the word up? Or are you taking it as a whole? I would maybe see Levi jeans or something, and then a mime
Mm.
as that sort of way of getting in there. And then I might even just use a stock image, because I have mime as my 33. So
Yeah,
just why rebuild the wheel? It's right there, sort of thing.
that's
So
it.
do you do that kind of thing? You draw from other systems, or break up the words, or how do you take a word like pantomime?
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned that, because a lot of people get, fall into this trap of creating extra images than they need to. So
Yeah.
pantomime, I already have an understanding of what that word is, so I wouldn't want to break it up, because then that just gives me extra things to remember.
Right.
Right now, again, it also depends on your first impressions. If my first impression is I need to break this word up, I go with that. But in the majority, if I know the word, I'll just try and take that at its, what it is,
Mm.
and then connect it to some sort of context, that's in a story format. So I try and do less is more approach.
Right. Right. That's interesting. Now, here's the number one thing that a lot of people are going to ask. I think, just from experience, they're going to say, "Okay, that's all fine and dandy. You got some sound in there. You got maybe some kinesthetic stuff. You got space. You got theater space. I think you mentioned, and you got all this stuff going on. How am I supposed to do that in 2 seconds? Especially when you're going to go and memorize names at an event or whatever. I know how it, but how do you do
Yeah.
it so fast?
It's hard. It's hard. It's really hard.
Is it?
Look, I mean, look, it's the same thing as, again, learning to play guitar, right? You
Mm,
look at someone who plays really fast and you go, how on earth do you play really fast? And you know what their answer is almost all the time? Learn slowly.
yeah,
I learned it slowly. So
yeah,
same thing with memory. When you learn, take your time. And that's how I went through it. I initially tried to go fast. My friend was doing everything slow. He was always a better memorizer than I was, always. So I reverted back to his method after 6 years instead of just trying to go faster every time. You can still do it that way, but it's going to take you a longer time, and you could easily give up as well because you're not getting the result. So I always say to people, just start off slow, build everything up. Um, just use your creativity, enjoy the process, and slowly, without even realizing it, you'll start to see times reducing. more and more and more, and then you'll get to your 2 second memorization. And even then, it's never guaranteed as well. And I'm sure we know, we've been out in situations, I know I have, where people have given their names. I'm like, oh, shit, well, I've got 2 seconds now. I haven't got it yet,
Yeah.
So it's human life, that's what happens. So yeah, we just have to, again, be mindful of those situations, and just be also mindful that we are humans. We're not going to get everything perfectly as well, and we might need to say, excuse me, can you repeat that again? It's not a difficult thing to do, and it's not a bad thing to do as well.
No, if
People are
anything,
generally understanding.
the bad thing to do is just let things fly when you had the opportunity to just get the
Yeah.
information so that you had it. I mean, I had to
Yeah.
train myself rather than be embarrassed. I just cooked up a little mantra, so to speak, like an out loud mantra, which is,
Mm.
I work on improving my memory. I'm sorry, some clutter was in there. I didn't catch your name or whatever, and they just get it again, and
Yeah.
just call a spade. And that's been so freeing to not have like the ego issue or
Yeah.
punishing yourself because you blew it.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, part of it just seems that it's always like the stock answer, but it's just like it's mindset more than anything. At the end of the day, it's almost like 80% mindset and then 20%
Mm.
technique.
Absolutely. And those people stressing out, trying to be perfect in every way, it's just let it go. If you forget, you forget. Just remember the lesson from it.
Right.
Remember the lesson from it. Get your pen out, get your phone out, and just jot these things down, because you can start to look at them and review them and say, oh, why is this happening all the time? Or if you can sense patterns and themes, that's why it's great journaling or writing down things like this as you're learning a new skill, because then you can start to understand and analyze that data and say, oh, wow, I've been able to achieve this because of such and such and such, or I've been down because this is happening. And it's great to analyze data. And I'm really an advocate of that when you're learning any skill, is to just jot down as much as you can, take notes, in the hope that, you can go back and start to review and analyze them in a way that will help you moving forward.
So for the person, to kind of bring all this together, for the person who's listening to all this and they're sure super excited and they're still doubting, that this is the skill to have, or the set of skills. We're really talking about bringing
Mm.
together a number of things with the mind mapping and memory and reading and all that sort of stuff. For the person who still, really wants to do this, but has this block inside of them, what is the thing you would advise? I think we've already sort of gone through it, but just to
Mm.
bring it all together for that person who either doesn't have enough self-belief, enough confidence, or for whatever reason, they can't, in the same way that I can't get myself to do certain things, like what is your go-to sort of, here's what I would suggest to break through this obstacle and get going and, you know, have some traction, have the taste of what it's like to be moving.
I'm glad you asked me that question, because I was one of those people. I was a skeptic when I first started out. So I never believed
Right.
in memory techniques or speed reading or mind mapping or understanding of that. And I used to watch a lot of late night TV when I was younger. And, David Letterman was the big one in Australia. And you'd see people get on there and memorize audiences' names and words. And I used to think these guys were fake, trying to sell it was cassette tapes back then.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, they're just marketers. They just want to make some money. So I was against it. And then what I did was, a friend came up to me, right? I told you this story. He said he can memorize such and such and such. I tested him and he memorized everything. And he said, well, I asked him, how did you do it? And he goes, I read this book on memory. So, all it took me was to pick up one book, just one book on memory, start reading a few pages, go through one exercise that got me to memorize the planets. I mean, it was like 9 planets back then. Tony Buzan's book, Use Your Memory.
Yeah.
And it just blew my mind. I thought, what? This is amazing stuff. So we're in a better position now because we've got a thing called YouTube, and Google's got many more searches there. So channels like yours, even mine, we're adding so much content on there. People can just get on there and just learn this stuff and start using it straight away. So that's what I'd say to people is, Google, get on YouTube, watch your videos. There's so many people out there doing this stuff and they're doing great work. So just go and learn the techniques and then learn to apply them. We're at the best possible, scenario now for you to learn. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I want people to go and follow this, and we'll have the links to your YouTube channel and so forth. But since you mentioned the tapes and all that sort of stuff, I was thinking recently that it's not really any different, a lot of this stuff that we do now. It's almost just like the infomercials are better, but it's still, in order to be able to do it, we've got to somehow, have traffic going to this or that destination. And I just wonder, my personal feeling has been for quite some time is, yes, go and find the people, but I suggest to people, just pick one for a while, like 90 days minimum. So if they're going to go follow you, like spend 90 days, read your books, follow your what you've got on YouTube, etc. Maybe get on a thing with you, and just go with the 90-day thing. There's lots of time for the other people, but the problem with the difference between our age, where it was like you get a book, you didn't have a book in your pocket that interrupted you with 50,000 other books, so
Yeah.
and now it's almost like you have to impose those rules. So I don't know, am I misguided in that? Because there are some indications that like interleaving and having more than one thing go on can help your memory. But again, we're talking about like 50,000 potential other things. So, and I'm obviously recommending people spend 90 days with you, because that would help them a lot to really get a sense of your teaching and through your books and your videos and so forth. But just as a general principle, does that make sense to you, or is there an
Absolutely. I
alternative?
think, yeah, I think that's a great approach, because you're honing in that person's honing in their focus on that one topic, and the way of learning and the style, and an interruption comes in. Now there's going to be questions that person's going to have, and those questions can be unproductive in a way. So let's say you do, Memory Palace one way, and so these people, they're in the process of learning the Memory Palace. Someone else comes in saying, no, you do it this way. Now that person's going to be confused. And because of that confusion, and that's not just one person, we're talking YouTube, there's tons of videos out there. So you got, information coming in and out, that person's going to be overwhelmed. It's like, geez, what do I do? Eventually they're going to pick one person, but I think it's best, exactly what you said, to just get in, follow the one person, and just understand. Again, it's all about the knowledge on how you interpret it. Get a good sense of the knowledge first, understand it, and then once you've understood it, once you've practiced it a number of times, see how someone else is doing it, and then now you've got something to compare from your knowledge, not as you're building up your knowledge. So I think what you said there is, that's how I'll definitely tackle it.
Yeah, okay, I'm glad. I like to test these concepts that I have, because it's just, that's the beauty of this, is you can have discussions and not always go with the one sort of thing that's on your head. But I really am concerned about that, because I see so many people doing exactly like that. Oh, well, so and so said the Memory Palace this, and it's like, yeah, well, they could be right, but I mean, have you used one yet? Because if you're not actually using it, then comparison is good for the sake of madness at some level, if you don't actually have that foundational technique. So that's why I especially love, the ability to not only have the access to the content, but the access to a person like yourself who does coaching and training, and can get people through exercises that are revelatory. So thank you for doing what you do, and hope we can spin around to another conversation and do this more often.
Yeah,
Just a
yeah.
great
Thank you.
blessing.
Thanks for having me as well. And look, there's you've been doing some amazing work as well, and I'm super excited to obviously see you get this out there to people as well, and all the other content you're doing. So yeah, thank you so much, because I think look, I think we're sort of guardians of this knowledge, so to speak. So we have to protect it and make sure, it doesn't get corrupted as well, because there is a lot of junk and garbage out there, and we have to really try and help a lot of people out. And unfortunately, there are people, out in the community, just teaching the wrong methods or giving people the wrong impression. And unfortunately, that's, it does come back to us as well in some form. Now, maybe not to us individually, but to those people just starting out, trying to be those memory coaches and trainers and speakers, it could have an impact on them as well. So that's what I find that, my job is to make sure that what we're doing is sound and it is, people can approach it in a way where they are benefiting from it, and not in terms of, I've tried speed reading, I've tried mind mapping, it hasn't worked for me, I'm just going to dismiss it, because that'll be missing a massive opportunity for other things in life as well. So thank you as well for that.
We have to start, our own Memory Avengers league or something like this. Memory Avengers, we get a special office besides Spider-Man or something. a council room. But yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. We are custodians of the tradition. That's, I think, going to be even more and more important going forward. And obviously, with great power comes great responsibility. And so there's also the future teachers to come, because there are going to be people who are going to talk about techniques they haven't fully fleshed out or used. But by the same token, it's so exciting that even the smallest little triumph makes you want to often, get started as a teacher and so forth. So,
yeah,
I mean, the scales will be balanced one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the people I work with, some of them want to become teachers and instructors, and I'm like, fantastic, this is great to hear. So, you show them the strategies and show them how to get out in the right manner, and how to actually help people out. So it's great. It's great that we can sort of share this knowledge, and hopefully people watching as well, if you want to become an instructor, just and a lot of this stuff, just go out or contact one of us, and make sure that we are passing on information that's going to best help people as well.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. I mean, right or wrong, I just was lucky because I had lots of experience teaching film studies, but whether I was a good film studies professor or not, I don't know. That's up to the students. But nonetheless, I, had some experience with at least teaching these things. So I've thought a lot about putting together like some kind of course, how to teach memory. But it's got to always be two parts, right? Because there's like, how do you actually teach anything? And then how do you actually get people to see your teaching or, be part of that? And so a difficult nut to crack, but that's lots of time in the world yet left to come. So thanks for being part of the adventure and such a good friend to me and what I'm hoping to do. And let's collaborate more when we can.
Let's do that. Thanks for having me on. And I'm looking forward to the next chat we have.
Cool. Let's do that soon. Okay, so I can just, did you want to add anything more on, or is something I didn't cover? If we...
No, I think that was good. I like the flow and nature of things. I think it's probably answered a lot of questions from people. Like it, it's good. Yeah,
okay.
It's great.
Like, I don't mean to in a manufactured way roll it to an end. It just seemed like a kind of a natural stopping point there for one recording.
Yeah, I mean, we went for over an hour, didn't we? Anyway,
Yeah,
so that was cool. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right, so there's a few in process. So it'll probably be maybe, I don't know, the second week of August or something around there. Is that cool? Or did you?
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Thank you. Really appreciate you. Yeah, helping us out, because like I said, I'm just in the process now of actually enjoying making videos.
Right.
And it's not like I'm forcing myself now. It's like, okay, I get to do it. I'm excited by it. And I think that sort of, it's good timing. I think it's come out there, and hopefully we can start doing more of this stuff. I mean, I haven't spoken to Mark since last time as well, and he's an absolute gun. Love that guy as well. So like I said, if we can get some sort of an Avengers thing happening, man, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I just don't know how to do it. But yeah, we're going to do one with Mark for his new book. I ordered his new book. Hopefully it'll be here tomorrow or something, and I can have time to read it before I talk to him. But yeah, I don't know exactly how to do it. I mean, there's so much competition at some level, and the way to resolve the competition, especially when everybody has different business configurations and so forth. But it can be with the Zoom or whatever, like roundtable things, and everybody's links there, and just talk about different things. Ideally on live streams though, rather than recording. But I'll think more about it. What what that could
Cool.
look like. But I think it'd be a nice little series, The Memory Avengers. Something like this.
We can have cartoons made up or something like that. So
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Somebody knows how to do that. But
that's it.
yeah, so I like I said, I'll put an intro on here and an outro and so forth, and have it all linked up to your channel. Your website is still
Cool.
going, I'm sure, to link to, and anything else, like
So
obviously.
with when you put the video up, because I'm still new to this, right? I've got the community tab now. So
Mhm.
can I post a link to your video from my community tab as well and tell people to jump on there to watch the video? Is that
Yeah, I post links to other channels. I just pop them in, and then if I wanted to mention you, so you saw the mention, I would just put at Tansel,
oh, okay.
and then it should
Oh, cool.
populate your channel name. And one thing I often don't remember to do, which I should, is in the actual title of the video, you can put at. So instead of putting
Oh,
like,
right.
whatever we title this with
Mm.
Tansel, I can put in the at Tansel, and I got to remember to
Oh,
do that
cool.
because if the person has a channel, of course. And then I don't
Yeah.
know if it helps with the SEO or whatever, but
It'll probably help because when I check my SEO, and thanks for your help, by the way, because when I went back into it, I started doing the analysis of all the videos and search terms. So that helped a lot. And I really
all right.
appreciate that. A lot of people are searching for my name, which is bizarre. I'm like, how the hell do they know me?
Yeah,
Type
yeah,
of thing. But obviously from, they know me from stuff. But
yeah.
so if you do put at, I'm sure it'll come up with whatever. But that's not the aim anyway. I'm sure the whole video is going to be intriguing and interesting for people anyway.
At the end of the day, I mean, the algorithms are the ones that all figure this out. So everything we give them to make the connection, as long
Mm,
as when they find the interested person, then they're going to try to find other people like that
yeah.
to at least show it to them. And it
Mm,
sinks or swims basically based on, the retention of individuals. But I'll also have the audio out on the podcast and this video on a page on the site, and do what I can to get it all
oh, cool.
wildly and widely promoted to the best of my
Awesome.
ability. And yeah, I appreciate it very much.
Oh,
I just
cool.
love, as you know, I just love the topic. So it's it's
It's an
such
interesting
a
topic.
crazy
Yeah.
blessing to be able to be doing this for so long.
I know. It's amazing. Yeah. But yeah, thank you. Thanks again. No, I better let you go as well because
Yeah, yeah.
sure you've got some other stuff to take care of. Yeah.
Always endlessly. Well, I'm going to read this. I got permission from the rights holder
Yeah.
to
Okay.
read Shadows, this translation of Shadows on a live stream. So starting to prepare for
Cool.
that. That's going to be wild.
Awesome. So I'll
Cool.
catch you Thursday, 10:30 a.m. then. Hopefully I can
Yeah,
jump on. That'll
that's
be cool.
that's when it's set. Yeah, and then you just see how it works, and people are
Just
chatting there.
yeah, because I've set premieres before as well. But I didn't know that you can chat and do all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
So
the thing is,
yeah,
if
it'll
you
be
want
good to
people to
watch.
show up, you got to kind of like use your community tab and say, make sure you know about this, etc. Because when I first did it, I thought it was a total failure, waste of time. But then I just realized from another guy that I was on
Mm.
his show, and all kinds of people were showing up there. I was like, "How did you do that?" He's like, "Well, I told them. I promoted it a couple times during the week," and I was like, "Oh,
Mm.
okay."
Cool, cool.
So yeah, but yeah, as long as you promote it a couple times before it happens, then you'll see
Yeah,
people showing up.
awesome, cool.
Cool.
All right, well,
All
thanks
right.
again,
Yep.
and we'll chat soon.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Talk
Thanks,
to you
Anthony.
later. Have a
Cheers,
great
mate.
day.
Bye.
Bye bye.
You too. Bye.
Wow, was that a powerhouse of information for you or what? When you're ready for more, head over to Tansel's YouTube channel to get subscribed, follow him on Twitter or LinkedIn and Instagram, and of course, head over to tanselali.com to connect. Until next time, thank you for being part of the great mnemonics renaissance. If you're a channel subscriber, extra thanks to you, and especially if you have any of the books or programs I've put together. Everyone on Team Magnetic really appreciates it. And if you like conversations like these, check out our epic discussion with Braden Adams next. When it comes to long-form content, his discussion of how he went about preparing to memorize 70 decks of playing cards is absolutely incredible. You'll learn a lot and enjoy what you'll learn from him as much as you enjoyed what you learned from Tansel today. And as I always like to say, until we have a chance to speak again, keep yourself magnetic.